Garden rooms. Now, why the number 4? Think about Franklin Roosevelt for a minute.
He had 4 terms as president.
Yes, of course you knew that. 4 terms in office.
Were you guys homeschooled?
That's it. That's really,
Really, you know more than most.
Seriously, so impressive. 4 garden rooms for 4 terms in office. Never happened before. Never happened since. Now not allowed to happen. All of the presidents that are elected end up in one of 2 tracks. They either serve a term and don't get reelected, or serve a second term, and only once, until a year from now, has it ever happened that there was a break in the term.
That's right.
Oh, we have a prize winner. Grover Cleveland. Well done. That's exactly right.
I know.
This is one of the loudest places in Washington. This is the flight line. So the Potomac River's right there, so all the time. Grover Cleveland accomplished a couple of things, but the thing I just wanted to tell you real quick, his wife, he had a very young wife. He got married while he was in the White House. He was already president. Okay, and this is very famous. Married this wonderful young lady. Her name was Folsom, and as she until it became Grover Cleveland's wife, so Mrs. Cleveland. Mrs. Cleveland, the day they left for the first 4 years, okay, she turned to the White House staff and she actually said, this is documented, take care of this old house because we're coming back. I think Melania maybe could have said the same thing. So we'll see. I don't know how this is going to play out. But it'll be the only second time in American history, if Trump pulls this off, that it would be a gap in 4 years and then the president again. Okay? So I don't know enough details on
How many years did Washington serve?
George Washington served 8 consecutive years. And he graciously stepped down and said, let's have it be someone else's turn. So that was very deliberate that he made that. It was not a rule until Franklin Roosevelt took the 4th time presidency. Now, here's the point. 4 times 4 is 16. That's not how many years he served. Very good. He died in office. We've had 4 presidents that have been killed in office and 4 presidents that have died of natural causes. Franklin is one of them. Franklin died of natural causes. They elected him for an unprecedented 4th term, and a few short months later, he had died. It was an aneurysm of sorts, cerebral hemorrhage, something along those lines. Related but not directly to the disease which he carried through his life, which was polio. He had polio. He contracted it as a young man. He was on vacation in Canada. He was very athletic and really enjoyed the water. He was a sailor. At some point in that vacation, he contracted polio, thought it was, like a lot of us do, we don't know how bad it is at first, very sad. Thought it was the flu or something, no. Never walked again.
Aww.
And this is what's so interesting. My parents' generation, my mom explained it and so did my grandma. She said, you knew that because you read about it, but you never saw it backed up. You never believed it because, first of all, there were so few photographs of Franklin Roosevelt. There's a reason for that. He had, I mean, not of him, but of this. He wore braces and never on his own, with very few exceptions. He could do something wobbly, but he couldn't walk per se. Instead, he had these braces, click, click, now they're straight. He'd have a cane on one side and often an aide or his son on the other. If you came and saw him give a speech, if you got there early, it might, this is, oh, guys, it's driving me crazy. This may be what you would have seen. It would have looked very awkward, like this. That's how Franklin Roosevelt walked. But you didn't see that. My mom said by the time you would see him live, he's already up there. And he's charismatic, and he's forceful, and he's jolly, and he is yelling out to the crowds and telling them, hey, fellow Americans. So great charisma in his personality. My mom said that's what you thought about. You never thought about his legs.
That's what I think. He also gave a lot of radio speeches so people couldn't see him, but he could still talk to them. Fireside chat.
Fireside chats, Franklin Roosevelt, and you made a link I never thought of before. Thank you. That was actually very good. That was a very good thought. The idea that you hear my voice, you hear my words, and you don't stare at my legs. One other thing. Raise your hand if you saw National Treasure. Okay. At least one thing in that movie is true. The first one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The White House desk really was a gift from Queen Victoria. It really was from the HMS Resolute. That famous desk is still there today. It's the desk that held Reagan's jelly beans. It's the desk that's been here with all of us for all these years. And Franklin Roosevelt in the 1940s altered it, actually probably 1930s, sorry, altered it in two significant ways. He raised it 2 inches. That's to accommodate his own self-made wheelchair that didn't have arms. It looked like a regular chair when he pulled up. And he had a panel put in the front that was carved to match the rest of the wood. Many years later, John F. Kennedy's little boy, John, was down under his daddy's desk playing with it, and we discovered there was a hatch. He actually opened a little latch and made a little window out of the hatch, and there's a famous black and white photograph of little John underneath the desk. That panel was put in by Franklin Roosevelt. And again, it was to hide his legs, not as a secret, but to just redirect your attention up here where it belongs, okay? It was such a open secret about his wheelchair that they decided when they first designed this memorial to not have a wheelchair. But that was overruled. I think that was the right decision. So at the very first room, you're going to see the wheelchair. My intention is to give you a very quick synopsis and walk through at your leisure and pick a time where we're going to see you by the wheelchair. So give me a few more minutes, but how do you like that plan? Is that okay? Because then you can spend as much time in each room. Fourth and final room, what you see in here is unlike any other presidential, and I don't know why we do this, but we don't have first ladies. We made an exception in this case because in her own right, she deserves her own memorial. Again, I am not making political statements for or against anybody politically. I am telling you her level of accomplishment is staggering. So after the death of her husband, Eleanor Roosevelt, a great proponent of civil rights, rights for women and rights for anybody else that she thought she could help, rose through the ranks to become ambassador to the United Nations. So next to her is the emblem of the United Nations. Pretty darn impressive. The water features in every room remind us that Franklin Roosevelt loved the water. He was a sailor. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy before he was president. And so was his distant cousin Theodore. Both of them worked with the Navy. The fountain groups start as a flood on the left and the trickle on the right. It reminds us, you read it backwards, it's like the trickle of the economy becomes a flood and it becomes gushing and the economy is moving again. So it's a retrospective of all of the different fountain groups that you're going to pass as we go back through his life. Now this one's just for fun. Before Franklin married his wife Eleanor, what was her last name? Don't. Shush.
Roosevelt.
Any of you?
Roosevelt.
Okay, you all get ready to be grossed out.
Roosevelt.
Thank you. Her last name was Roosevelt. I knew you were going to say it. Her last name was Roosevelt because Franklin married his cousin. Ooh, if you were 8th grader, you would be screaming ooh right now. Like a 5th cousin, twice removed, not a close cousin. Eleanor was a much closer relation to her famous uncle, who was Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt walked Eleanor down the aisle on her wedding day because her dad had died already. So the uncle gave away Eleanor to their distant cousin. They were close kin. Their distant cousin, Franklin Roosevelt. Total different side of the family. Hyde-Pellet Roosevelts, go visit their estate up in New York on the Hudson River. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Theodore Roosevelt family, Oyster Bay. Nice enough house, but nothing like the wealth of the other Roosevelts. Very silver spoon, Franklin Roosevelt family versus, and just a quick plug for the Theodore Roosevelts, there is actually a plaque in the White House, it still exists, that says, Theodore Roosevelt put this in, it says something along the lines of, many great men have lived here and made great decisions for our country, but no one ever had as much fun as we did. Theodore Roosevelt was a crazy cool dad. And especially when his wife would leave town, he would do antics like you can't imagine. And one of the more famous ones is one by one, he lowered all 6 of his kids into a basket off of the 2nd story with rope and then would repeat it up and down. Okay, next kid. A friend came to visit and said, isn't Edith going to kill you when she finds out? And naturally, what did Theodore say? She ain't never going to find out. So he would do stuff like this all the time with his kids. He was really a fun dad. Okay, Theodore Roosevelt, we'll leave him for a different talk, a different day. So we've said pretty much all we need to say in this room. This is when he dies. 1945 is the end of this memorial. Okay, next one you're going to come to, World War II era. So it's 1941 to 1945. You're going to see a fountain group, as well as Franklin Roosevelt wearing a cape doing the convention, doing the negotiations to end World War II. The next one you come to is the Great Depression. Stand in line behind the guys in the bread line, but frown, don't smile. It makes a better photo, okay? And then finally, the room where I'm going to meet you all, you're going to see the New Deal rolled out, columns with plaques. Just beyond that is the room with the wheelchairs, okay? It's about a 10-minute walk if you mosey, and that's what we want you to do. Let's give you 15.